So if you see dead Kennedy stuff that belongs on alternative tentacles on anything else in the future, and I do get totally wiped out, feel free to spend your money elsewhere. That's one of my ways of fighting back, and it has cost me dearly to the point where it's turned into Kurt Cobain, I'm coming to join you sometimes. It gets so upsetting, all this. If you've ever had a really badass legal case hanging over your head, you know what I'm talking about. Meanwhile, other people are fighting back too. And not just giving up and saying there's so much wrong with the world I wouldn't know where to begin, so I'm just not going to begin at all. Maybe I'll just go score some dope or watch TV. No. I think what's important is people are starting to pick battles one bit at a time that are actually winnable, which can then make the bigger picture look better in the long run instead of hopeless. For example, United Students Against Sweatshops. One of several organizations, and this one has sprung up almost within a year or two on 200 campuses nationwide, pressuring school administrations not to make all the rah-rah school mascot sweatshirts and t-shirts in places that use sweatshops. And some of these schools have backed down and agreed not to do that anymore, to actually make sweatshop-free merchandise for the football fans and things. And that's important. On top of it, USAS is credited with being the ones who forced Nike to open their books. This isn't just an important issue, it's one that we can do something about at a time where in the U.S. territory of Saipan, on that island, women have to work 12 hours a day behind barbed wire for next to nothing, making clothes for, among others, The Gap, Walmart, Tommy Hilfiger, The Limited, and Sears. Another student organization has sprung up called Students Allied to Reform Corporations. I like that agenda. In other words, people not just giving up and putting up with a slow but sure coup of the corporations taking over our constitutional government. But again, corporations are trying to co-opt. It's been trumpeted with much fanfare that Levi's, among others, who also has a badass sweatshop reputation at this point, I might add, right around the time Klaus Fluoride in particular was pressuring me to sell out to Levi's, they laid off 6,400 workers in Texas, while at the same time paying a $100 million bonus to one retiring executive. They claimed sales were down, we had to cut costs. Then a few months later, I see a little item in the paper that they're opening new factories in China. Levi's was one of the first to announce that, well, we're taking a stand against sweatshops by becoming part of the Fair Labor Association, the FLA. The FLA is basically, it's a labor version of what's called greenwashing, where you pretend, like Al Gore pretends to be a big friend of the environment, but then does the opposite when nobody's looking. Well, with the FLA, corporations hire their own monitors for the factories, check only 5 to 15% of them. The FLA notifies the companies ahead of time when and what factories they're going to check. Third-party contractors are exempt, and then if they see that the 5 to 15% of the factory is okay, all the company's products can be labeled sweat-free inside the garment. And not a word from the FLA about wages. So, others who are a little more concerned about this have formed the Workers' Rights Consortium, the WRC, which is designed to do what the FLA pretends to do. Workers' Rights Consortium is corporate-free. They do not warn companies which factories they're going to inspect, meaning all of them better be clean. They publicly disclose what they find. But here's what can happen on the other hand. There was enough student pressure at the University of Oregon that they dropped the FLA and went to the WRC. So Phil Knight, the head honcho of Nike, pulled a $30 million grant from the university in protest. Nike strikes again. Granted, that was only money for a new football stadium and no scholarships for poor people or anything, but still, this is the kind of heavy-handed tactics we're dealing with, but it's very important to keep up with Students Against Sweatshops and the Workers' Rights Consortium and not to fall for the flaw. One organization that's been instrumental in bringing this to our attention and helping organize the Seattle protests and A16 in Washington, Public Citizen is one, which grew out of Ralph Nader, but the one I'm thinking of here who's also worth becoming a member of is Global Exchange. They're headquartered in San Francisco. I'm sure their website is probably globalexchange.com. And that reminds me, there's also a www.worldbankboycott.com if you want to get more hip to that. And there's another one, 50years.com, which is for 50 years is enough, who wants to abolish the International Monetary Fund. What Global Exchange is pushing for is both through their own retail stores and to get corporations and others to do this worldwide, not free trade, fair trade. And they, or the WRC, can certify what is fair trade. And guess who, of all people, sort of caved into this when Global Exchange threatened a national boycott? Starbucks. Agreed to have fair trade coffee, at least as an option, in their outlets. It's worth taking a look and see if they've got that, and maybe even biting the bullet and giving a little money to Starbucks just to encourage them to keep this program, because they also said if nobody's into it, they're just going to drop it. My guess is fair trade is going to cost a little more simply because they're paying the farmers a lot more to grow the beans under fair trade. But it is a start. On top of it, when was the last time anybody outside of the members took organized labor unions seriously? This is happening again now, too. They're getting hip, and there's younger people coming up through the ranks. What I would love to see, and they're talking about this, is organizing temp workers and organizing the assembly lines of Silicon Valley, which is one of the most toxic industries around now. Largest concentration of Superfund sites in America is in Silicon Valley. Something needs to be done about that. And if people are going to unionize to fight back against corporate feudalism, why not a nationwide union of college students? Demanding a stop to these budget cuts, demanding an amnesty on all student loans. Other countries in the world are serious about wanting smart citizens, so they pay to send people to school. This one, student loans, will be just like the World Bank, only we're going to do it to you as an individual. I mean, that's the way the student loan system works, basically. And for that matter, why not a union of high school students, too? You know education cuts are going too far when people are actually protesting in favor of school when they're in school. That's how dire things are getting. There's other ways of fighting back at the school level. Have you noticed how there's this big push for mandatory testing now? So in Colorado, like in the city of Chicago, where this has also happened, there's a movement I'm calling Hex the Tests, where the students are deliberately filling them out wrong en masse to protest the testing.